Hello and welcome to Civil AI System Getting Started. In this tutorial we're going to talk what is needed in the scene and how to set up NPCs, houses and workplaces. Node groups will be covered in another video. So within here, after you've got the asset package imported, we're going to have to bring up the AI manager. So within AI there's Civil AI System and then there's the manager. When you bring this up, we have a host of options. The first bit is information, which is linked to a Wikipedia, well, a wiki. On here you can read up the definitions of certain objects and also see an overview of the system in written form. We have performable actions next, which has a series of options. So the first one is node groups. This is how we get your AI behaviors in from the flowchart editor, but we're not going to cover that this episode. Then we have the setup AI in scene. This is the core bit we're going to start off with. So when we click this button, we have two objects added to the scene. The first one is a game manager. You don't have to have this added. There is also documentation in the wiki on how to edit this, but to give a quick summary of what it does, all it is a timekeeping. So this has a float value 1 to 2400 and this is the time of day. This ticks by. When it gets to this 2400 it resets back to 0 as you would expect, and it just carries on. The global civil manager, this bit is just used to import the actual AI behaviors, and that's basically it. So we have these two groups and we have two layers set up, one called resource, one called civil. This is used to help optimize the system. So civil are to do with actual places which are to do with the NPCs, so they are houses and workplaces. So they have to be on the civil layer to be picked up by the system, and they also have to be within a local region. So coming on to the region management, this is used to create a local region, which is another version of a civil manager, but is local to that certain area. So we'll make one called demo and we'll click create. This adds a new one into the scene, and it's also informed down here mostly. So you can know where they roughly are within the world, and you can also change the size of them. You can also find them within the world by clicking focus. So if we go on the inspector, this is the civil manager. It's selected here. You can change the size from here if you want to, or you can also do it within the inspector down here. There's some useful bits of information within here. So when a game starts running, on the first setup it'll scan for anything within the circle with a collision to find the houses and workplaces it's meant to manage, and then it'll figure out the max population and it'll spawn in a certain amount. So population will say how many are spawned in, housing will say how many possible living places there are within the region, and jobs will say how many jobs are available within the region, which are gathered from the houses and workplaces. So you can see which ones is the limiting factor, and it will probably be, for example, with housing with the limiting factor, and we had 30 population, housing would probably be at 30 and jobs would be, say, at 50. So you know, if you added in 20 more housing, you would get 20 more AI NPCs. We have a character pool, so this is where you set up the actual prefabs and game objects that you want the characters within your world to use for the NPCs. if a character pool object has a civil job of none, then that's in the global pool of this local region. So it can be used for any job the system wants to use it for. How do we actually make an NPC character? That's a good question. So what we do, we add in an object, and then we can go back to the manager and we can use one of these template options. So for an NPC, we click add in NPC, and this adds in all the required bits that are needed. So the default setting for the Civil AI system is to use the built-in Unity navigation system. That can be changed out. There's a wiki article about doing that, but keeping it simple, we'll keep that as it is. There's the AI controller. The AI controller is in charge of the most basic bits of the NPC. So that's animations, getting to a location, so talking with the NavMesh agent, and just kind of roughly telling when a job might need to be updated. Then one of the main parts of logic is the data board. So the data board keeps track of where its house is, if it has a job, what that job is. It has a local timer which can be used for certain actions, so you can make it stay in a certain spot for a certain time or some other things. It also tracks if it's mounted onto something or if it's at work and what items it's carrying. And then we have the animator. So there's a very basic controller which is included in the package. It has only two parameters which are booleans. One is moving, one is dynamic. Moving is, as you would expect, if it's not staying in the same spot, it'll do an idle animation which can be set within here. So we got the basic Unity one, which is just a simple loop of walking forwards. And then we have dynamic. Dynamic changes based on the flowchart and the AI node groups. So you can set a specific idle to have a certain animation. So you can give the idea that they're actually doing a task. So that could be gathering something or chopping down a tree. That'll, at runtime, be changed out, this animation. So it needs to be set up in this way, but the move, of course, can be more complex and you can have falling and so on and so forth. But this is a bare bone model of it and does the job kind of thing. So that's the nearly bare minimum of what's required in a scene. So two other things are needed, as you would probably expect. We need at least one spot for housing and one job within this zone. So we can add those in very easily by spawning in a cube, going back to the manager, add in the template, so that will change the layer and it will also add the house. We can give it a population and we can set that this is the global position, so it also spawns in an entrance and that's where the character will try to get to when they spawn in. So that changes and it's shown with a black dot. We can also add in another one for a workplace. with that added in, we're given a civil layer. We also have another entrance which you can see gets placed where it is, and we need to give it a job. So a workplace can have multiple jobs and multiple people doing those jobs. So it's a array of data here. So if I press plus, we get our first element. We can select from a drop down list. This drop down list is made by the AI flowchart, what job they will do, and then we can put in how many positions this particular workplace has of that role. So if we add in 1, that means the woodcutter, there's 1 position at this workplace and there's 1 place to live. Of course, we need to add in an actual terrain area for them to move around, because the AI board, the AI needs to be on an av mesh. It can't just be up in the air. So we'll just spawn in this scene. So we'll move these to 0, 0, 0, and we'll also move this to 0, 0, 0. And let's say this is the workplace, this is the house, and then we need to make a nav mesh. So you go Windows, AI, Navigation, brings it up here, and we just bake. And you can see there's now a nice movable area around. And the final bit is we need an NPC. So what we did earlier, we made an NPC. You would then save it as a prefab, and then you would use that prefab in the game object here. So like so. So we can say anybody can use that. Well, let's say woodcutter. We'll have a character spawn in, which will be given a name and made a child of the local civil section, and they'll stay at home till it's time to go to work. So if we look at the game manager, we can see the time here. So if we say it's midday, they'll start heading to work. Some things to point out here is green is highlighting the entrance to their house, red is showing the route they're going to take to get to work, blue is showing their workplace, and as you can see the animation is being applied, and we can see the method in action currently in use. Along with that, we can also see how many job, duty, tasks, methods and actions were imported. So I think this shows a nice basic setup of how to set up your characters and how to set up a bare bones system of the actual AI system. Any feedback, any information, please let me know, and I'll do my best to help.